Hey, what's up everybody? Mark MacKinnon here. Today we are talking in this video, the next part of the series, about customization. So this is really part of the previous chapter, which is about attributes. Customization is how you take the attribute and we change it to fit what you're looking for. I talked a little bit about that during the attribute section, but let's talk about a little bit more detail. Customization is about enhancements and limiters, and that affects what your attribute can do, whether it's the scope of it or it's about the power level of it. And it creates an effective level. So an attribute at level 4 may not function at level 4 if you're adding in enhancements and limiters. And I want to talk a little bit more about that as it goes. Enhancements and limiters are opposite to each other. An enhancement, as it's described, enhances your attribute slightly, gives it a little bit more oomph compared to the baseline attribute, where a limiter gives it a drawback compared to what the attribute description is in Chapter 5. And these enhancement and limiters, various ones can be added to different attributes. Some attributes can't take any enhancements and limiters, where other ones can take tons of them. And so by looking at these enhancements and limiters, you're going to be able to customize the attribute to be exactly what you want. So if player A has a teleport ability, maybe they can teleport a certain distance determined by their attribute level, level 4, for example. So I have it, I can teleport myself and my belongings, my clothes, up to what the distance is for level 4. But someone else may also have a level 4 teleport, but rather than just themselves, maybe they want to take a bunch of people nearby. Maybe they don't want to just take themselves and teleport. Maybe they want to teleport other things. Maybe I want to take that car that's not even near me, it's across the street, and then I want to teleport it a distance determined by my level attribute 4. Or maybe that car and everybody around it within a 30 meter radius, for example. So my application of teleport could be different than your application of teleport, even though we both have the same ability, but our effects are going to be different, and that's where the enhancements and limiters come into play. With enhancements, there are 4 base enhancements. In the attribute section, particularly for weapons, there's a lot more of them, but in terms of the baseline that can be used for a lot of different attributes, it's 4, and that's area, range, targets, and duration. Area is very straightforward. It's an area out from a center radius, and that affects everything in that area. Range is the distance away from the character. So something can have an area of 10 meters, and that functions different than a range of 10 meters. If someone has an area and a range, then they can center that area at a distance out of what the range is. Duration, pretty straightforward, is how long something lasts. So a lot of the attributes, they have a finite duration, usually 1 minute or dramatic scene. That's kind of a standard amount of time when working with a lot of attributes, is something will function for 1 minute or dramatic scene. But duration is a way to change it. So maybe someone wants to put in a particular ability like a trap, for example, and they want it to last longer than that amount of time, they can add on the duration attribute and it'll function for a longer period. Same with something that could be like exorcism, teleportation to another dimension, a pocket dimension, or maybe they want to have something about walking between planes. Duration may come into effect as something that's going to change from the baseline. The final one is targets. Targets functions a little bit differently than area. For example, if someone has healing, they may choose the number of targets they have, and if they don't have a range and if they don't have an area, everyone has to be really close by, and I can heal maybe everyone I touch. But someone may have an area and a targets and a range, and what that means is I can heal, say, 50 people who are over there on the other side of the street within a certain area that they have. So all those 4 base attributes are listed here for the enhancements. There's one more special enhancement, and that is called potent. This comes into play in very specific circumstances where you want to make sure that you can get enough limiters added to an attribute in order to function. So, as I already mentioned, what limiters do is they increase the power of an attribute. And so while there's 4 base of the enhancements plus potent, there's a lot more limiters. And so if someone wants to add on a bunch of limitations onto their ability, they may take their level 1 attribute and they add on one limiter, and so now it functions at level 2, and they add on another limiter, and now it functions at level 3. So by adding 2 limiters onto an attribute, it instead of functioning at 1, it functions at 3, even though they purchased it at 1. But what if the player only wants the attribute to function at level 1? How do you do that? Because limiters, when you add them on, automatically bump up the functioning level. And that's where potent comes in. Potent is just a way to get that number down. Potent usually only can ever be applied to level 1 attributes, because what it'll do is it brings down the effective level by 1 for every level of potent. And unlike, say, range, which is very straightforward, range might be 10 meters, and then 100 meters, and then 1 kilometer. It's very straightforward on its progression. Potent works a little bit differently because it's all about making the dice rolls better whenever you're using that. It's more, your use of it is more potent. So when you're reading the description of it, so at 1 assignment, what it does is you get a minor edge on your stat rolls whenever you're using that power. So you don't really have to understand what that is. That's in the game mechanics section. But what it'll allow to do is give you an advantage when you're rolling dice. And then at 2 assignments, instead of giving you a minor edge, it gives you a major edge. And so these, you even have a bigger chance of succeeding. And so unlike someone that doesn't have any potent associated with it, where they're making a regular die roll according to the game mechanics, when you have potent, it makes succeeding with your attribute a little bit easier, even if it doesn't change the functionality. So what that does is it takes that, remember that 1 attribute that I said, maybe you add on 2 limiters and it's a level 1 attribute, you add on 2 limiters and now it functions as a level 3 attribute. Potent level 2 will bring it back down to functioning at level 1. So it's easier to make those dice rolls because you're getting a minor or a major edge because you've chosen potent level 2, but it still functions at level 1. And so it's all going to be very clear when you're reading this through. Table 11 is allowable enhancements. So you don't know every single attribute that can take the different enhancements, and this describes it. So something like dynamic powers, for example, that attribute can take area, duration, range, and targets. Where something else, mimic, so you're mimicking someone else's ability, only has duration and range. So it doesn't have area and it doesn't have targets. Because mimic, you're only mimicking one person. And so thus that cannot take on the targets enhancements. So that's described here in Chapter 6 of what your allowable enhancements are. When you're getting into the limiters, as I mentioned in the next section, there are a couple dozen limiters that you can have. And these are things that restrict the attributes. Let me just talk about a few of them. So, for example, activation. So this is the amount of time it takes. And these are either going to be 1, 2, or 3 assignments. All of the limiters can be applied 1, 2, or 3 times. So with activation, if you apply it once, you're going to need to spend 1 round before you can use that attribute. So think of it like a classic wizard. So they have to spend a whole combat round casting their spell before they unleash whatever it is, whether it's their flying ability, their teleport, their fireball, or whatnot. If you assign 1 assignment of the activation limiter, it's going to take 1 round. 2 assignments will take 1 minute, and 3 assignments will take an hour. So if you're, say, summoning a creature from another dimensional plane with your portal ability, you want to open a portal and bring someone in from another dimension. Well, maybe that takes an hour of preparation time, and so you're going to want to have 3 assignments onto that limiter of activation onto that attribute. Now, it does mean you're going to function that attribute 3 levels higher. Even though you'd only buy it at level 1, it's going to function at level 4 because you put such a heavy restriction on it versus someone else who also has that dimensional portal, but they can use it instantaneously. It doesn't take an hour to use. And so that's where the limiters come into play. There's assisted. Assisted ends up, you can have assistants helping you. So you can't do this by yourself. Going back to the previous example, maybe you have the dimensional portal. Yes, it has activation time that takes an hour, but maybe it also takes a large group of assistants to help you out. If you need 50 acolytes to help you with your chanting and your energy and open that portal. So with 1 assignment, it takes a single assistant. With 2 assignment, it takes between 2 and 10, and then with 3 assignment, it takes between 11 and 100 different helpers with that. So the limiters are a really great way to customize your attribute. It does restrict it, but you're getting a more powerful attribute because of that, because your functional level is going to be higher. So the limiters are ideal for customization. The enhancements are good as well, of course, whether it's your area, your range, your targets, your duration. But the limiters are really, because there's so many more of them, it allows you to get in and take that baseline attribute that is described in Chapter 5 and then start putting on these restrictions, which will make the attribute more powerful, but it restricts it in terms of what it can do. Once you so customization, the enhancements and limiters, they don't cost anything by themselves. You don't buy an enhancement or you don't buy a limiter. Instead, you buy the attribute at the level you want, and then you can change the functioning level. Maybe you want a functioning level for flight. And after adding all of your enhancements and limiters on it, maybe you only need to purchase 2 levels of it because it's going to be bumped up by 2 effective levels because of the 2 limiters you put on it. So while they don't cost anything to buy an enhancements and limiter, it is going to make your attribute cost a little bit different because you don't have to buy 4 levels of flight if you only need to buy 2 to get that functional level 4. So that's Chapter 6, all about customization. In the previous edition of BESM, it was presented a little bit later and was more of an afterthought. This is integrated as it's part of the baseline for BESM. Not every game is going to use them, but if you do decide to use them, working with your GM and the other players, it's a way to make your ability stand out versus anyone else by making it what's good for your character. So that's it for this chapter. Next chapter we're going to get into in the next video, it's going to be all about defects. Hey, thanks for watching.